which I was completely unaware of before that. Even though I'm a student of history, I studied history in college, I've been reading history forever. But even then, it came as a complete surprise to me, this whole chapter of the Indian past. And then as I began to delve into it more and more, I suddenly discovered that it could have played, an important role in my family, because maybe some of my ancestors were employed by the Opium Department, which was by far the biggest game in Chhapra and in Saran district. So, but I would say what is true of me is to some greater or lesser extent true of virtually every family.
Exactly.
In the Gangetic Belt, in Malwa, or whatever. I mean, this trade had such a massive role in 19th century India. In fact, it affected most of us in one way or another. It's really a mystery, but in a sense also not. Because after all, the Indian Army fought, the British Indian Army fought in so many wars.
Yeah.
The British just used the Indian Army to fight really all their colonial wars, not just in China, but also in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, for example, and also in East Africa. And those wars are not remembered within India, or very much remembered by East Africans, by Southeast Asians. So I think it's part of a more general pattern. It's a very strange thing about British colonialism. Essentially, British colonialism was a military domination. And, the British Raj has been described as a garrison state, which it in fact was. I mean, the army was by far the most important institution. And the British knew this. And they often said, at the end of the day, we rule India by the sword. But this was never recognized within Indian society, in a sense. So this is partly because the British were very careful to keep the army out of sight. So you have these cantonments which civilians can't enter. You have particular military cities which are really, in a sense, hidden from the view of the civilian populace. So it was perfectly possible to live in British India and not be at all aware there's an army here, there's an army all around us. But the instant you actually say something subversive or do something subversive, they'll materialize at once, because the entire transportation infrastructure is built upon making easy movement possible, the railways and so on. So, in a way, that's it's a consistent theme in the writing of colonial history, that the role of the army is very much neglected. So that's one of the reasons why we sort of, I suppose, these foreign wars are kind of hidden from view. Certainly, Indian soldiers were aware. I mean, we know this because of Gadadhar Singh's memoir. He understood very well how destructive opium was for China. And I'm sure, many others were aware of this. Many of the Indian traders who were involved were aware of this. So certainly, I think they had some awareness of what opium was doing to China, and they recognized it. And as you say, are they, as with the American traders who are hiding the role of opium in their activities, Indian merchants also did that. In fact, until today, many of them won't let historians enter their archives. This whole subject is considered taboo. They won't let it be spoken of. Certainly, the opium money was the predominant. I mean, certainly from the 1830s, 1840s onwards, Bombay was literally kept afloat by opium. I mean, and even people. I mean, Govind Narayan, for example, chronicler of Bombay, he says so quite openly. That opium is being traded here in the bazaars and so on. So yeah, Bombay was very much a city kept afloat by opium. But this is true not just of Bombay; it's true of Singapore.
Right.
Singapore
Yeah.
could be a free trade, could be a free port solely because it was essentially financed by opium. The same, it's absolutely true of Hong Kong. Hong Kong was built in order
Yeah.
to be an opium smuggling hub once they were chased, after the war. So, yeah, I mean, this is the hidden history of globalization. All these major cities, I mean, if you think of cities like Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Bombay, these four cities together handle what? Probably 30-40% of world trade. And basically, they all came about because of the opium trade. Your guess is as good as mine. Look, I mean, one aspect of this is, of course, the stigma, absolutely deserved stigma. So, but that stigma drive, creates a sort of repression. It creates all these silences whereby people don't talk about these things. They try and suppress the knowledge of it. The second reason is, again, I think it's one of the really difficult things about writing about this subject is that it's a completely global story. Absolutely, it's absolutely that. One of the reasons why it's possible to talk about what the Western countries did to Africa is because Africa is so clearly a victim. It's very difficult to conceive of the Chinese as a victim.
Yeah.
Because they're so strong, so
Yeah.
powerful. It's such a huge behemoth. But in fact, they are. They were. I mean, they were certainly at the, I don't like victimologies. I don't like even to use those terms. But it's certainly true that they were on the receiving end of this history. And they, with incredible sort of effort, self-healing, they managed to overcome this problem. They're the only society that has really dealt with mass addiction, in this way, and that has actually survived. Not only survived, but gone on from strength to strength. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. I don't think America will ever succeed in battling its opioid crisis. I mean, it's a society so powerfully divided today, as you know, that it's going to be very hard for them to reach any kind of consensus on how to battle